How's it going, everybody? It's Master1994 here, and today we are going to take a look at my Black Knight cosplay. Now, as always, there is a table of contents in the description below, so if you want to skip any part of the video, go ahead and take a look at that table of contents, and you should find exactly what you want to see. As far as our stat allocation goes, notice that I am only level 100 so that I can have as many invasions as possible. And also note that with this build you will have the most points to play with as a warrior or a bandit class. Now we need 49 endurance so that we can medium roll with all of the Black Knight armor, the Black Knight shield, and the heaviest of the Black Knight weapons. We also need 36 strength and 18 dexterity so that we can use any one of the 4 Black Knight weapons. All of our other points went directly into vitality to make our health pool as large as possible. For our equipment, we are obviously using the Black Knight shield and the Black Knight armor. We are also going to use one of the 4 Black Knight weapons. Now, all of these weapons have different attack ratings, they have different weapon swings, but they're all relatively strong, and I enjoyed playing with all of them. And that's one important part about this build, is that we get this variety. We're also using the Ring of Favor and Protection, but our secondary ring is optional. I chose to either use the Hornet Ring or the Wolf Ring, as the Black Knight armor only gives us 50 poise, and 50 poise is decent, but it's not really enough to avoid being staggered by a lot of hits. So the Wolf Ring really helped, but of course the Hornet Ring is always nice as it increases our crit damage. So the point of this build is just to play with different weapons and play with different secondary rings and find out what you like. So I made this build because it was recommended in the comments of a previous video. And I'm so glad that they recommended this build, because with the different weapons and with the different rings, you got a lot of variety, but this is such a good knight build, and it's so nice to have a decent knight build that also has options. And it even got to the point where sometimes I would switch weapons mid-fight, and it was always beneficial to switch things up, and it was always exciting to use different combos. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and see some of these combos in the upcoming PvP clips. So the first thing that I'd like to talk about is just switching weapons to best suit your needs in the fight. So I switched weapons, before the fight, just based on what the enemies were using. I switched mid-fights a few times, like you can see here. I switched to the sword to finish him off, but he got away and healed. So now I'm going to switch to the great sword because I really like that great sword running attack, and I finish him off. And I think that was probably one of the best examples of switching weapons in combat. But you'll also see me, switch weapons depending on, what the enemies are using. So this next clip, I'm using the halberd, but I notice he's rolling very quickly. So I'll switch to the regular sword so that I can catch him with the R1 easier. And it ends up paying off. So that's the general idea. I've already talked about how we have options, different weapons, different rings, but that's really what's so amazing about this build. So, for example, when I was fighting ganks like I'm doing here, I tended to use great weapons and the Hornet Ring so that I could one-shot people easier with the backstabs, because that's really one of the best ways to finish off ganks. During 1v1s, I generally, not always, but generally used the Wolf Ring just because I like the extra poise. This build doesn't really have enough poise by itself. So the Wolf Ring gives it 90 poise total, and you can take pretty much any hit. So that was helpful. But honestly, when it came to the 1v1s, I was just using what I felt like using at the time. I used all the weapons, and I used both the Wolf Ring and the Hornet Ring. I kind of already mentioned in the intro that this is a pretty general but very strong knight build. You have pretty good armor, you have the awesome Black Knight weapons, You have the potential for, awesome crit damage or awesome poise, depending on which secondary ring you use. And I mean, let's be honest, you look awesome. How cool is it to be a Black Knight, right? But what it comes down to is this feels like an upgraded Havel, honestly, just because you have the parry. And if you guys have been watching any of my content, especially the Dark Souls 1 content, you know I love the parries. So this has been really beneficial for me, and I thought this was an awesome build to get better with the parries, especially if you're using the Wolf Ring and you're not going to be too punished if you miss a parry. This is the build to practice with. So I'd kind of like to quickly go over the different weapons that we're using. So firstly we have just the sword, which is actually a great sword, but it's the Black Knight sword. And this weapon was, obviously the quickest, and it had the lowest AR, but it felt really strong when I was two-handing the Black Knight sword and using the Wolf Ring. I really felt like a knight, and I was kind of eating up that Claymore meta, right? The great sword meta, which I usually never do. I usually hate the great swords, but with the Wolf Ring and two-handing it and not really playing my shield, I had a lot of fun. With the halberd, I also liked to two-hand it, but it felt nice to have the shield and the extra range on the halberd, so I would generally use the hornet ring with the halberd. For the great sword, I think this is my favorite one. I really liked two-handing this and using the wolf ring. There's a few clips here where you see me do exactly that. Just kill people with nothing but R1 combos. So that was great. And then the great axe. This was probably my least favorite weapon, just because I don't really like the R1s very much, but it had the best AR, so it was the best weapon to use the Hornet Ring with and destroy ganks. Another thing I would like to talk about, and we just saw it actually, is the R2 attacks. I really didn't like the R2 attacks, which is what I would say is the biggest downside to this build, is that we have bad R2 attacks. So we're pretty much only using R1s. And we can switch our weapons a lot, but other than that, we're kind of predictable with our regular attacks because the R2s leave us so open. And that's the problem with the R2s, is that, they do some decent damage, but they are slow, and there's a huge recovery time on all of the weapons R2 attacks. So I generally didn't use them at all. I think I used 2 R2 attacks in this whole video. I'm going to conclude here. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, this video was requested, so if you'd like to see some specific content, don't forget to let me know in the comments below. Again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.